Ah, there you are, friend. Welcome to the fire. You want to know what one of my pet peeves is? Well, it's when someone drops a whole, "Oh, I've been playing this for so-and-so years, which means I know better than you," thinking that's some sort of mic drop and makes them some sort of end-all be-all authority when it comes to a game. Nope, that's when I usually just roll my eyes. Have you ever played Warhammer? No? Then shut up. After a D&D session, r/RPG horror stories, posted by Gino4. It's probably not the worst story that you'll read here, but I just need to rant. This story starts with my best friend N joining an online D&D one-shot and telling me about it. Now, I am a forever DM, and as soon as my friend tells me about his game, I ask if he may be able to get me a spot too. The DM tells him no, as he already had 4 players and 5 players were too much to handle. This will be relevant later. I said, alright, that's perfectly reasonable, and go on without another thought. But not before asking my friend to invite me to this public D&D Discord that he used to find the game. Some time passes, and I'm on that Discord lurking around in search of a game to join. To my surprise, the same DM posts again that 2 spots were opened, and I PM'd him asking him to join. He says, yes, and I start to prepare my character. Shortly after, he sends me a lot of links to make my character online. Stuff like Token Stamp 2.0, a list of magic items, a point buy simulator, and etc. Which surprises me because his post on Discord asked for only experienced players. But I didn't really care, so I said in response, and I quote, "Thanks, I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the one-shot if you don't mind." In response, he sends me the same links again. Alright, I'll ask anyway. Do you mind strong characters? I'm not gonna power play, but if the session is gonna be about combat, then I will likely make a strong PC since I'm planning for a fighter. He sends me the links again, without answering my question. Alright, pretty weird, but maybe he's busy. I'm not gonna bother him. The day of the session comes, and after a very brief introduction of each PC, we immediately get an info dump with multiple handouts. We were playing on Roll20, which is weird because the Discord post didn't mention much about the background, just that we will be defending a military cemetery from an undead wizard that wanted to raise the soldiers as his army. I'm going to list all the odd/bad things about the session, which lasted 4 hours. The only relevant info about the PCs was that we were level 8 and one of the players was using a bear totem barbarian, halves all damage except psychic. I find out that there were 6 players in this session, and the DM says he's used to running sessions with 10 players. All RP is instantly shut down. The bard wanted to scare a couple of children who was hanging around a bad district, and they pretty much ignored him. In the first 15 minutes, we're introduced to about 6 named NPCs, 3 factions, the name of a couple of cities, and the name of the BBEG. This is a one-shot, I might remind you. After 15 minutes, we get into combat, which lasted just shy of 4 hours. A single combat. At the start of the combat, my PC wasn't able to shoot at an army of skeletons that was going to reach the cemetery in a round, even if my range was 600 feet and the DM confirms time and time again that we're able to see them. The first half of combat is wasted fighting these 20 skeletons. Each had 18 AC and more than 50 HP, and the only thing they did was attack from melee. At the same time, there was about 6 NPCs that also act, making each round last an eternity. The DM tries to argue that the barbarian should take full damage for the skeleton strikes as they are magical, but all 6 of us argue back and he backs off. At least, it seems so at first. At the start of the second round of combat, around 2 hours in, 5 undead golems rise from the ground and 2 named NPCs plus 5 NPC soldiers arrive from the other side. One of the named NPCs on a griffin instantly kills a undead golem, while the other named NPC, a captain, attacks 3 times in a turn with bonuses that put his stats above 20, or his level insanely high. At this point, 8 skeletons still remain, most of which are still untouched. After another full hour, the BBEG appears and is instantly stopped in place by 3 named NPCs that keep him occupied while we slowly chipped away at the remaining skeletons. Yes, they were still alive, and the golems. Finally, after another full hour, we bring down the BBEG, and as a final FU, he explodes, dealing psychic damage, coincidentally downing the barbarian. Now, isn't that convenient? We get back to our sender, which we find out is an undead, and every attempt to attack him is thwarted by the DM saying, "The light comes from the window and kills him." Okay? Now, the session is done, and after I ask politely to give him some feedback, and that I honestly did not enjoy the game, trying to explain my points without sounding rude at any point, I even asked my friend to message me if he thought I was stepping over the line, and even he said I was very polite. I told him that having so many tanky enemies and DM NPCs ruined the combat, and that I spent less than an hour of that 4-hour period actually playing, and most of the time I was just waiting for my turn. In response, he rudely tells me, "Your first mistake was giving feedback. I've been a DM for 4 years and I know what I'm doing. What was your first TTRPG?" I'm slightly annoyed by his attitude, but I answer that I've been playing and DMing D&D for 3 years, and that I started out with D&D. He then says, "Well, whatever. Do you know how much time it took to organize the session? More than a week." Which was most likely a lie, since I always see him posting on Discord new one-shots, and he used a map he found online and literally 6 tokens in total. He continued rambling on for a while, and when asked why he took a whole week to prepare a one-shot, he said a bunch of things about balancing and how Wizards of the Coast doesn't know how to make fights fair, which, by the way, is true, only when talking about weird abilities like save or suck stuff, i.e. Basilisk. All the enemies did in this one-shot was attack and soak damage, which is something that the CR system can perfectly represent, making your job as a DM extremely easier. He kept going on, saying that the reason for all these DM NPCs was that the one-shot was made for 10 players. Jesus Christ! Just put less enemies, and that he never had a TPK, which is odd, because in my experience, having absolutely no TPK in 4 years of experience, not even accidental ones, means that you're mostly playing the same stuff over and over. I admit that I started losing my patience and reached my tipping point. DM, "Well, do you know why I made the one-shot like this? If you knew how to play Warhammer..." Me, "Well, I do know how to play Warhammer, which is in no way relevant to D&D. Playing D&D like it's an army game is akin to squaring a circle, which is something I found out the hard way when I had to cancel my first campaign because I extremely mismanaged the war, and it was becoming a slog for me to plan and play. DM, ... me, ... DM, "Well, I can bet that you're not a professional player." And then he went on. Shortly after I apologized, said goodnight, and went offline. My friend apologized to me later because he thought it was his fault that we had to play this awful session. We laughed a bit about how awful it was and forgot about the one-shot shortly after. After this, I was so salty that I put on back my forever DM hat and started hosting my own one-shots on the same server, making sure that I accepted feedback while making fun and interactive encounters, both combat and not, for my players. Seriously, what does Warhammer have to do with D&D? Unless you're actually playing the Warhammer TTRPG or a game set in the Warhammer world. And before anyone says anything, yes, wargaming does have ties to earlier editions of D&D, but that's no longer the case with the modern edition of D&D. They're like apples and oranges. Now, when the DM said, "I've been a DM for 4 years and I know what I'm doing," that's where I would have just tuned out. It doesn't matter how long you've been DMing for. I played in games where it was the DM's very first session and it was a total blast. And I've also played in games where the DM has been playing for decades and it was just awful. Also, not wanting feedback. Sounds like someone is a bit defensive and afraid of criticism. Feedback is actually good, because as DMs, it's good to get a handle on what your players want and don't want in a game. By getting this feedback, DMs can change things for the better if something's not working, or continue on with what everyone is enjoying. Remember, a happy table is a fun table. Feedback should be encouraged. And also, this goes for the DM too. As the person organizing and running the games, you should have some fun as well. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. And would you kindly follow the socials posted in the description below. As always, be good, be great, be awesome.